Hello, dear friends. Get ready for a fascinating tale that will both motivate you and sharpen your English. Today, we'll step into the remarkable journey of Albert Einstein, a man whose ideas reshaped the world and whose bravery to think differently left a lasting mark. As we go along, listen for fresh expressions and useful vocabulary you can add to your own speech. This isn't just about learning a language. It's about discovering how determination and curiosity can open doors to greatness. So, grab your notebook, stay alert, and join me on this path to strengthen your listening skills, grow your vocabulary, and draw inspiration from the story of a true genius. Albert Einstein entered the world on March 14, 1879, in a modest little German town called Ulm. His parents, Hermann Einstein and Pauline Koch, were ordinary folks living simple lives. Hermann earned a living in the electrical supply business, while Pauline devoted herself to the home and nurtured a love for music and learning. When Albert was born, there was nothing that seemed especially remarkable, except one curious detail. His head was unusually large. The family lightheartedly wondered if he would grow up to be just like other children. They had no idea this quiet boy would one day leave a permanent mark on history. Albert rarely spoke as a toddler, and his first words didn't come until nearly the age of 3. This silence worried his parents, and some people whispered that something might be wrong. He was nicknamed the Quiet One, since he often stayed silent even when other children were chattering around him. But his silence wasn't due to slowness. Albert was deep in thought, carefully watching and studying the world as if trying to solve its secrets. When he was 5, his father handed him a small object that would shape his entire way of thinking, a compass. At first, the strange little instrument puzzled him. How could that tiny needle always point north no matter how he turned it? His curiosity quickly turned into fascination, and he spent hours staring at it, determined to figure out the invisible force behind its movement. This was his first encounter with the idea that hidden forces shaped the world, and he became determined to uncover them all. Years later, Einstein would recall that moment as one of the deepest impressions of his childhood. When school began, however, he found the system frustrating. Teaching was strict, and students were expected to memorize everything without question. Albert wasn't content with memorizing. He wanted to ask, why, and uncover the answers himself. Albert's teachers often grew impatient with him. One teacher even told him, "You'll never achieve much in life." The comment stung, but Albert refused to let it crush his spirit. While he found certain subjects difficult, especially languages, there was one he adored above all others: mathematics. To him, math was the very language of the universe, and solving problems felt like piecing together a beautiful puzzle. Despite his academic struggles, his family never lost faith in him. His mother, Pauline, noticed his love for music and urged him to take up the violin. At first, he resisted the practice, but over time music became a refuge, a place where his thoughts flowed clearly. His uncle Jacob also played a major role in shaping his young mind. Jacob, who shared Albert's love for mathematics, taught him using playful and imaginative methods. He once told him, "Math is like a treasure hunt. Every problem is a clue that leads you closer to the prize." That spirit of adventure and learning made Albert fall deeply in love with numbers. Unlike most children, Albert spent little time on games. He preferred long hours with books, exploring ideas, and imagining the hidden mechanics of the world. He devoured stories of great scientists and often dreamed of making discoveries of his own. One afternoon, while walking home from school, he wondered, what would it feel like to ride a beam of light? That single question would stay with him for years. It marked the beginning of his lifelong quest to understand the mysteries of light, space, and time. At 15, Albert's life took a sharp turn. His father's business collapsed, and the family relocated to Italy. Albert remained in Germany to finish school, but the distance from his loved ones left him lonely and discontent. Eventually, he decided he could no longer endure the rigid rules and strict teachers. He left school without graduating, choosing instead to learn on his own. He devoured books on science, mathematics, and philosophy, teaching himself everything that fascinated him. It was a risky move, and many believed he had thrown away his future. Albert, however, was convinced that true learning mattered more than obeying outdated rules. At 16, he wrote his first scientific paper. Though far from perfect, it revealed his remarkable potential. That same year, he applied to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School, one of Europe's most respected institutions. But his weak performance in non-scientific subjects, like French and history, caused him to fail the entrance exam. Rather than quit, Albert pushed himself harder than ever, determined to strengthen his weaknesses. Failure would not be the final word in his story. Albert's early years were filled with rejection, criticism, and uncertainty. Yet his boundless curiosity and determination kept him moving forward. After leaving Germany, he settled in Switzerland, where the education system encouraged free thinking instead of rigid obedience. It was exactly the environment he had been searching for. At 17, he tried again for a place at the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich, and this time he succeeded. But life there was far from smooth. Though he excelled in mathematics and physics, he cared little for other subjects. Some professors disliked his unconventional approach and saw him as undisciplined. One even remarked, "You are clever, Einstein, but you lack discipline." And indeed, Albert was not the top student in his class. Yet he continued to follow his own way of learning. Albert often skipped formal lectures, choosing instead to dive into his own independent studies. While his classmates stuck to the set curriculum, he was busy chasing bigger, deeper questions. What is light? How does time work? Why does gravity exist? These were not the kinds of questions with quick answers, and most people didn't have answers at all. During his years at the Polytechnic, Albert met Maliva Merrick, the only woman in his class studying physics. Maliva was exceptionally bright and shared Albert's burning passion for science. They quickly became close, spending long hours in conversation, exploring bold scientific theories. She was more than a classmate. She was his intellectual partner and confidant. Together, they dreamed of making discoveries that could change the course of human knowledge. In a letter to her, Albert once wrote, "Together, we will conquer the world of science." But their path was far from smooth. Maliva faced harsh criticism simply for being a woman in the scientific field, while Albert struggled constantly with money. Still, they stood by each other and kept their focus on the future they envisioned. In 1900, at the age of 21, Albert graduated with a degree in physics. He was eager to begin a career as a scientist, but reality hit hard. Every university he applied to turned him down, despite his qualifications. His own professors withheld strong recommendations, seeing him as undisciplined and unmotivated. This was a crushing blow. Years of hard work met with rejection after rejection. But Albert didn't quit. He took whatever work he could find just to pay the bills. Finally, in 1902, he landed a position as a clerk at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. His job was to review patent applications and check if inventions were original. It was hardly glamorous, and it had nothing to do with physics. At first, the work disappointed him, but he decided to use it to his advantage. The slower pace left him free time to think, and the patent office became his thinking laboratory. While reviewing applications, Albert would jot down his own ideas about light, time, and space. Many nights, he stayed up late refining these thoughts. In 1903, he and Maliva married in a modest ceremony. A year later, they welcomed their first child, Hans Albert Einstein. Money was always tight. They lived in a small apartment and often struggled to cover expenses. Friends urged Albert to abandon his scientific ambitions for something more stable. He refused, saying, "I would rather struggle for my passion than live comfortably without purpose." That determination led to 1905, the year now known as Einstein's Annus Mirabilis, or Miracle Year. At 26, he published 4 groundbreaking papers that shook the scientific world. First was his explanation of the photoelectric effect, showing that light behaves like particles called photons, work that would later win him the Nobel Prize. Second, he proved the reality of atoms through his paper on Brownian motion. The third and most famous was his special theory of relativity, proposing that time and space are not fixed but relative. From it came the legendary equation E equals mc squared, revealing that energy and matter are interchangeable. The scientific community was stunned. A humble patent clerk with no academic position had just rewritten the laws of physics. After 1905, Albert's life began to change. Offers for teaching positions started to pour in. He became a professor at leading universities, yet he never let success inflate his ego. Albert kept asking the big, unsettling questions and continued to push science forward. He believed knowledge was limitless and curiosity the key to unlocking it. By 1909, he was known throughout Europe for his discoveries. He taught at the University of Zurich, then in Prague, and eventually returned to Zurich. The world began to see him as a genius capable of solving the universe's greatest mysteries. But Albert himself insisted, "I am no genius. I am simply curious. I stay with questions longer than others." In 1914, he moved to Berlin to join the prestigious Prussian Academy of Sciences. A major global conflict soon began, but Albert chose not to participate in activities related to it. Instead, he used his influence to advocate for peace. At the same time, his marriage to Mileva was falling apart. The pressures of fame and past financial hardship had strained their bond beyond repair. In 1919, they divorced, though Albert made sure she and their children were cared for. That same year, British astronomers confirmed his general theory of relativity, proving that gravity could bend light. The announcement made headlines worldwide and turned Einstein into a global celebrity. Overnight, he became the face of modern science. When asked about his sudden fame, he replied with characteristic wit, "If my theory were proven wrong, people in different countries might each claim I belong somewhere else. If it were proven right, they might all take pride in me in their own way." In the 1920s, Albert toured the globe, lecturing in the United States, Japan, and beyond. He used his fame to speak for peace, declaring, "Peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding." He defended the rights of minorities and refugees, becoming a voice for those who had none. Critics called him unrealistic, and others tried to undermine his work. His response was simple. Those with great ideas often meet strong resistance from people who see the world differently. By 1933, with the rise of an oppressive regime, Albert's safety was again at risk. His works were removed from libraries, his ideas criticized, and his freedom under threat. He left Germany for Princeton, New Jersey, joining the Institute for Advanced Study. Heartbroken over events in his homeland, he still chose hope over despair. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, he reminded himself. In 1940, he became a U.S. citizen. Though he played no direct role in building the atomic bomb, his famous equation laid the groundwork for nuclear energy. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed in 1945, Albert was deeply troubled. He regretted that his discoveries had been used for harm and spent the rest of his life fighting for nuclear disarmament. "Mankind invented the atomic bomb," he once said, "but no mouse would ever construct a mousetrap." Even as one of the most famous people on Earth, he lived simply, refusing to own a car, skipping socks, and sailing despite not knowing how to swim. His curiosity never faded. He pondered black holes, time travel, and the unification of nature's forces. Even as his health declined, he continued working until his final day, April 18, 1955, at the age of 76. His last words, spoken in German, were lost forever as the nurse by his side did not understand them. Albert Einstein's life left a mark not only on science, but on humanity. He taught that failure can be a step toward success, that self-belief matters more than approval, and that big dreams demand big sacrifices. He showed us that true greatness comes from passion, persistence, and the courage to challenge the impossible. Or, as he once said, try not to become a person of success, but rather try to become a person of value. If this story inspired you, like this video and subscribe to my channel.